Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of cryptids horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story. My own stupidity saved my life. I am a very dumb person. I'm not mentally challenged or developmentally disabled. I'm all there in a cognitive sense. There's just not much that's, well, there. I wouldn't call myself stupid, as that seems just a bit too harsh, and neither would I describe my general behavior and outlook on life as idiotic. I have sense, but am often not very sensible. I think dim-witted would best describe me, both academically and socially. Yes, dim-witted is perfect. I have taken the time to belabor a description of my intelligence for a purpose that will become apparent later on in this short tale. Whilst casually strolling along in my neighborhood after having spent the better part of the day staring off into space, a frequently indulged activity of mine, I was suddenly accosted by two gentlemen. These gentlemen were plainly not of the area, for one bore the likeness of a newly risen ghoul, and the other of its duty-breaking caretaker. The former, having a sallow and sunken face, upon which actively feasted several plump maggots, stepped immediately in front of me and said, "Apologies for the interruption, but we require your viscera." Being a generous person, I would have given them a portion of my innards, had I the capacity to subsist without them. But lacking that physiological aptitude, I was forced to decline. Perhaps expecting such a response, the other gentleman, dressed in an all-encompassing trench coat, with a black tricorn atop his head, withdrew a pistol from the pocket of the aforementioned coat and summarily fired it at my head. I fell, and the two gentlemen promptly began their business of unburdening me of my visceral organs, bringing forth a leather doctor's bag and a large Tupperware bowl. Darkness fell over my vision, and after a short interim of rather calming nihility, I awoke, perceiving again the mundane world. I at once surmised that the bullet had not had a fatal impact due to my characteristic lack of gray matter. Not for the first time in my life, I thank the Creator for having so generously blessed me. A glance at my stomach, the clothes that had covered it torn and discarded, showed the evidence of a small incision, along which ran several neat stitches. I remarked aloud that had I known I'd be spared death, I would have at least expected grislier results. But my surgeons had performed quite an immaculate operation, and I felt only slightly less gastrically encumbered. Apparently, they hadn't needed much. Ah, I thought to myself, the anatomist is yet another learned man whose teachings needn't be so faithfully believed. Arising, I continued along, my mood no less cheerful. But then certain baselessly profound thoughts came to me, as did some rather insightful observations of my environment, both clearly of a higher intellectual order than anything I'd previously been capable of. After a moment of contemplation, which in itself was rife with considerations and ideas wholly unsuitable, I came to the conclusion that I was under a spell of some sort, that I had not actually awakened from my abdominal operation. Coeval with this revelation, the world began to peel away, disintegrating like a wind-ravaged flower, and after a few moments I found myself staring up into the infinitely grim face of that dubiously dressed gentleman. The ghoul, who was, I should mention, entirely naked, stood a few paces away, apparently keeping watch. The man recoiled, not anticipating my premature awakening. He asked how I had come to relieve myself of the spell, and I politely informed him that while the verisimilitude of the dream to reality was impeccable, the clarity and acuity of thought he had endowed me with was wholly unbefitting of my normal abilities. Crestfallen, He rose from his crouched position and stepped a few paces back, allowing me to collect myself and rise. He hadn't yet cut into me, and I realized, dimly, that the actual operation probably required quite a bit of preparation. If the organs were to be harvested properly, the ghoul, overhearing the conversation, hissed and spat at his companion, deriding him for overestimating my intelligence. By way of response, the would-be surgeon started to cry, wanting to get on with my sojourn, for it was growing late and I am quite terrified of the dark. I announced that I was leaving them to their sepulchral business and sidestepped the sobbing man. The ghoul, for whom my organs would have doubtlessly been harvested, maneuvered to block my path and declared that he was still inexorably hungry, not wanting him to go without food, for he was already severely emaciated. I resolved to help him in his troubles. Turning to the gentleman I'd passed, I proceeded to rain blows upon him until he was quite dead, or at least firmly unconscious. Then, gesturing to the collapsed man, I said, "Well, here is provender for your empty belly. Eat well and be happy." Not caring that I had pummeled his companion, the ghoul nodded, a hunger-induced lunacy etched upon his cadaverous face. He strode past, and without any culinary preamble began tearing into the unconscious man. Just when the ghoul had unceremoniously created an aperture in the man's belly, the man cried out in maddened agony, and I felt a rush of relief, for I had never committed the act of murder and would have despaired to have wasted the opportunity on such a considerate man as that. Considerate in the sense that he had kindly overestimated my intellectual ability. I promptly hurried along, noticing with a chill that the shadows about the area were lengthening, and that the sun had nearly achieved its plunge below the edges of the flat earth, leaving in its wake the far-spanning wings of night. The encroaching black was quite frightful, and an eerie trilling and chittering of evilly jubilant insects rose above the choked gurgles of the ghoul's meal. I really do not like being outside under such frightening circumstances. Who knows what could be lurking in the depths of that illimitably pervasive darkness? Second story. In Too Deep, 2006, the worst year of my life. The year our 11-year-old daughter Casey disappeared. Casey was the light of our lives. My wife Evelyn and I doted on her from the day she was born. Never did we think that a random stormy day in September would be the last time we would ever see her. September 23, 2006. I awoke to the smell of pancakes cooking away in the kitchen. It was 9 a.m. I lay and gathered my thoughts as heavy rain pelted off my bedroom window. I was thinking about how I was just about to get promoted to assistant manager at my firm. Money was tight lately, and it would really help out. Just then the bed jolted as my daughter Casey ran from the hallway and jumped on top of me. "Daddy, wake up. Mommy's making pancakes. Chocolate chip, your favorite." I laughed and picked her up in my arms and brought her into a tight embrace. "Is she now? Well, I better get dressed and come right down." I laughed as I tried to get up off of the bed. Casey ran back downstairs. I quickly got dressed and followed behind her. "Smells amazing, hon," I said as my wife glanced over with a smile. "Yeah, well, it was Casey's idea. I'm just the cook," she said with a fun, sarcastic tone. I sat at the breakfast bar while Casey handed me a knife and fork and a half-empty cup of coffee. She'd spilled the majority on the floor on her journey over to me. "Wow, thank you, Casey. This looks amazing, sweetie," I said as Evelyn places the pancakes in front of me and rolled her eyes while trying to hide a giggle. "You're welcome, Daddy," she said, batting her long lashes as she watched me take the first bite. "Hey, Casey, why don't we go for a walk in the woods after breakfast? Look for deer tracks," I said, trying to swallow my mouthful. "Oh, yes, please. I'll go get dressed right away," she said excitedly. I chuckled as I watched her run up the stairs at lightning speed. "Come on, Casey. Time's ticking, I shouted up the stairs, feeling impatient. Coming, Daddy? She yelled from over the landing as she appeared at the top of the stairs. Her curly red hair fell over her face as she tried to shove on her pink bobble hat. She had already put on her white coat with the fur hood and a pair of red snow boots. Let's go, she said in a sing-sing voice, and off we went. As we walked through the woods, the trees twisted around each other at the top, casting a dark shadow onto the wood floor. The wind whistled through the leaves and the rain fell softly onto our faces. Daddy, I think I see a track, Casey shouted from up ahead. Oh yeah, let me see. I ran slowly to catch up to where she was pointing to. You're right. It is a track. Good job, honey, I said, feeling impressed. We walked further through the woods and chatted about school and what Casey had been getting up to. Just then a tall man with his face half covered with a scarf stopped in our path. Hey, buddy. Everything okay? I said, feeling uneasy. Hand over the girl, he said in a deep, emotionless tone. What? No. No, I said in a panic. He then pulled out sawn-off shotgun and points it toward us. Hand over the girl or I will shoot you in the *king face, he seethed. I stood in shock, a million things racing through my mind. Please, don't hurt us, I pleaded. You have one more fucking chance. Hand her over or so help me God I will kill you. I stared at his cold dark eyes and finally did the unimaginable. I handed over my only child to a masked monster.
Daddy, no.
Please, Daddy, help me. Don't leave me, Casey screamed, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, I said. But what was I supposed to do? I didn't want to die. I know what you're thinking, world's worst dad. But she's not even my kid. Not that she or anyone knows. Her mom had her on a one-night stand and I brought her up as my own. Right *CK, I need to get my story straight. We went on our walk and she was kidnapped by a madman. Well, that's actually true, I just did nothing to stop it. The next few weeks were hell. Evelyn was inconsolable. Police were constantly in and out, taking statements and trying to find witnesses. I felt awful lying to my wife, twisting the story ever so slightly, and I felt bad, I really did, but I was in too deep and so close to getting that promotion. I could make this right. We'd have more children. We could still have a good life. October 7th, 2006. It had been 2 weeks since Casey was taken. We just returned home from putting up flyers when 2 police officers knocked at the door. Officers, please tell me you found her, Evelyn said, her voice cracking. Can we come in? We need to talk. I gestured them inside. Please sit down, sir and madam. I'm afraid a body has been found near an old shack in the woods. I'm really sorry, but it appears to be Casey's. Evelyn let out a scream that wasn't a shiver down my spine. Please? God, not my baby. Not my Casey. I fell to the floor as I cradled my hysterical real wife. Shit, what have I done, I thought. Will anything ever be the same? At least now she can never tell that I didn't fight for her. 17 years later, I sat in my chair watching as my teenage twin boys played on their game station, Evelyn in the kitchen making my favorite, chocolate chip pancakes, when suddenly the phone rang. I'll get it, hon, I said as I picked it up from the side table. Hello? Hello, Daddy, remember me? My blood ran cold. Warehouse? Who is this? I stuttered. Oh, I think you know exactly who it is, and he'll see you soon, Daddy. The line went dead. I stood in complete shock as I tried to come to terms with my new nightmare. Third story. A legend, they said. Reading the stories, I had always been a skeptic. Stories, alleged first-hand experiences, hauntings, possessions. They are all well and good for a quick chill, a cheap thrill, something I read to get my heart rate up. Getting scared can be fun sometimes. As long as you don't overdo it, just a little something silly to get worked up about. In my lurking in books and on numerous sites on the internet, credible or not, I have come across many a story or account about ghosts, demons, the Jersey Devil, you name it. Recently, I have found my way into stories about the BK, or black-eyed kids. No, these children did not get a black eye from a fight. I don't believe there would be a soul out there with the backbone to try and attack these kids. No, BKs are kids. If that was not straightforward enough, usually, from all the accounts I have read, in their teenage years, if they even physically age at all, their eyes are pitch black. No pupils, no corneas, no white showing at all. Pitch black. They have olive skin and wear run-of-the-mill clothing, as in hoodies. However, in a non-physical sense, they always bring with them an overwhelming sense of fear and dread. They are intriguing, and when approached by them, again from all the accounts I've come across, it's like you are in a slight hypnosis, though you quickly snap out of it when your instincts take over, usually as you meet their eyes. Then there are the theories. The theories about what these BKs may be. These theories range from lost souls to alien/human hybrids, and even to vampires, though the latter may be an extreme stretch to link the BK to the current social infatuation of vampires found commonly in young persons. In light of all this, I have always been a very fact-based person. If its existence was not apparent, or the existence of the thing in question was not testable and verifiable, to me, it did not exist. However, one night, one long, terrifying night which still haunts me to this very day, showed me the proof required to open my eyes and mind. My story begins when I left my mom's house. I had gone over to visit because my father, her husband of 63 years, recently passed away, and Mum wasn't taking it too well. I knew she needed support from her loved ones, and I was more than willing to go visit and keep her company, but it was getting late. My mum lives in the suburbs. Tidy lawns, plenty of neighbors, paved roads, and even though it was near 11 p.m. when I left, the streets were extremely lit by the streetlights who always had your safety and ease of mind at heart. These lights only lit the road, though, and glancing across the street, the houses were cast in an eerie shadow. Even a rather safe, charming little neighborhood can seem spooky and uninviting when cast in shadow. I admit, I was terribly chilled. Sliding into my car, I revved the engine and waved to my mother, who was standing in the doorway, wrapped comfortably in a warm shawl. She waved back, her old and fragile arm shaking. I saw her mouth be careful and I smiled, backing out of the driveway. I turned out of the neighborhood, deciding to take the back way, the shorter way, home tonight. In hindsight, that might not have been a good idea. I live a significant ways away, out in the middle of the country in the old farmhouse I grew up in, which my father had left in my name when he and Mum had moved out, into a place smaller, more easy to care for and affordable and social. He, my father, had always told me, growing up, don't go out at night and always beware the devils. He was a strong believer in anything and everything paranormal, a very superstitious man, and I always had to resist the urge to laugh at his words, but I knew he meant well. Driving down the dark country roads, there were no street lights, and the half-assed paved road was cracked and filled with potholes. The fields on either side of the road were empty, just blank stretches of overgrown grass and untended shrubbery. The dark outline of the trees of the woods could be seen looming all the way across the fields on the shadowy horizon. One might have even seen a deer or two once in a while in those fields, but not tonight. The moon offered little light, as the sky rolled with dark, threatening clouds, ready to burst with rain or a storm at any moment. Sure enough, a few moments later, the low grumble of thunder sounded, heavy and long. However, no rain fell just yet, much to my pleasure. I hate driving at night and in the rain, and putting those two together would end badly. I just knew it. accompanied only by the occasional roll of thunder. I started to feel a bit anxious. I can't explain it. I just felt shaken up, probably because it was night and it could start raining. Or maybe I had been reading too many ghost stories and legends, and tonight seemed to reflect the mood of the stories I read almost obsessively. To try and calm myself, I flicked on my old car's radio and turned the old-fashioned knob back and forth, slowing down a bit as I attempted to find a station that came in clearly. Nothing doing. Weird. There was a broadcasting tower right near here. It usually came in perfectly, clear as day, but still, nothing. The white noise and static of the blank stations was doing nothing to appease my anxiety. I gripped the steering wheel tightly as more thunder boomed from the sky. Aggravated, I forcefully shut off the radio, gritting my teeth. Glancing down at the dashboard, I noticed I was nearly out of gas. Groaning, I searched the road for a sign for gas. As I was scanning the side of the road, I noticed from the corner of my eye two figures walking on the side of the road, shrouded in shadow. They were walking slowly, one turned around, walking backwards, his or her thumb sticking out. I felt compelled to pull over, give them a ride, and I found my hands turning the wheel slightly, but I pulled back, realizing how stupid it would be of me to accept two random strangers into my car in the middle of the night on a backcountry road. I sped up and passed them, trying not to look at them as I did so, though I felt oddly intrigued by them. As I focused on the road ahead, it started drizzling, dropping my mood another level or two. Along with the rain, the thunder seemed louder, closer, as the storm moved in. A few seconds passed until I gave in to my compulsion to look at the two figures, and I glanced in my rearview mirror. It seemed as if the two were walking faster, and the one no longer had his thumb out, but it had to be my imagination. How would I be able to tell if they were walking faster or not? It was rainy and dark. Looking back at the road, I almost missed a sign that alerted me of a gas stop up ahead. A sigh of relief passed my lips and I slowed down, looking for any indication of the stop, pushing the thought of the two figures from my head. Soon I was pulling into the gas station, slowly as the rain started to pick up. The store was closed, but luckily they had a 24-hour gas pump service. That was good for me, as if they had not, I'd have run out a few more miles down the road. I shut off my car and hesitantly shuffled out of the metal shell and glanced over my shoulder, still not being able to shake that nervous feeling that had manifested inside me earlier that night. I stood under the light of the overhang, trying to figure out how to work the pump, which seemed so overcomplicated in the dim light, and with my mind not being able to focus on this simple task. The rain picked up more, heavier and louder against the concrete of the gas stop as I finally was able to get the pump into my car, forcing my hand to stop it shaking. I had a horrible feeling that my shaking wasn't just because of the bitterly cold night air. Suddenly, the overhang lights of the gas stop started flickering wildly, a couple going out altogether. It seemed as if the temperature dropped 20 degrees in a few seconds as I glanced around, a sinking feeling starting to blossom in my stomach. As if in slow motion, I turned around, facing back towards the road, the long, lonely road, and saw what I expected to see there. But even as much as I knew what I'd see, I still felt the drop of my stomach, the color draining from my face, and I breathed a sharp, cold breath forcefully as it almost caught in my throat. Across the street, the two figures were standing, facing me. They started crossing the street slowly but surely, and I fumbled with the gas pump. It had only been a few moments, but it seemed as if the gas pump was taking its precious time. I was shaking hard now, as thunder boomed once more, and I looked back up. The figures were now at the entrance to the gas stop, and my breath was quick and shallow, as I blindly shoved the pump back into its holder, not being able to tear my eyes away from the figures. As they drew closer, I became more frantic, even though, now as they walked into the flickering light of the overhang, I saw they were just two teenagers. They looked ragged and frigid and soaked from the rain. I straightened up a bit, still terrified, but another compulsive feeling, similar to the one I experienced in the car, was bubbling, and I felt obligated to talk to these two. Though, I insisted to myself to just drive away, not to risk anything. They were extremely close now, at the next pump when I slid into my car, shaking wildly, and fumbled for my keys, cursing myself as I dropped them on the floor. Leaning down, I swiped them up and sat back up, a cold, sickening feeling as I came face to face with one of the teens, who had his hand on my window, knocking slowly, but forcefully. I rolled down the window a bit, just a bit, no bigger than to allow maybe a small child's hand through. Before I spoke, he spoke first, the other figure standing in the background, still, but I could see something of grin there on her pale face. "Can you give us a ride into town? We missed the bus and don't have a ride." He spoke slow, and something about his voice made me shiver. A cold chill swept down my spine and I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Clearing my throat, I glanced at the dashboard and at the keys in my hand. "I am sorry, but I'm not going into town," I stuttered, keeping my eyes down, not at the kids. However, the teenager knocked harsher and made me jump a little as he insisted another time for a ride. I told him no once more and looked up, trying to seem intimidating, which seems silly, trying to seem intimidating to a child, but a horrible, chilling sight greeted me. I looked the kid right in the eyes and gasped sharply, my back hitting my seat as I went to back away. He had eyes, oh he did, but they were blacker than the night, pitch black. No discernible pupils, and no white whatsoever showing. Pure black, deep, brooding, and surprisingly intriguing. But my fear got the better of me and I quickly turned the key and my engine revved to life. I thanked God, which I had never, ever done before tonight. My car had not stalled and went to pull away and the kid banged on my window with a pale fist, screaming for a ride. I took off speedily down the road, apologizing to my father again, and again I had laughed at him, never took his warnings seriously. After a few more minutes, I pulled into my driveway and right into my lawn, in front of my porch. I didn't want to spend any more time outside than I already had and jumped from the car, leaving the car door open, and ran inside, slamming the door and locking it, even going as far as to put a chair in front of the door in case someone or something tried to get it. Sinking into the chair in front of the door, I shivered uncontrollably and started to cry, hiding my face in my hands as two dark figures stood at the end of my driveway. Fourth story. The creature in the attic. I woke up to a strange noise coming from the attic. It was a low, guttural growl that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then I heard it again, louder this time. I got out of bed and tiptoed to the hallway, listening for any sign of the noise. It came again, a deep and menacing growl that seemed to be coming from above me. That's when I remembered that we had no pets, no wild animals, and no explanation for the noise. I was alone in the house, or so I thought. I slowly made my way up the creaky stairs to the attic, my heart pounding in my chest. The growling continued, louder and more insistent now, as if it was warning me to turn back. But I was determined to find the source of the noise, so I pushed open the door to the attic and stepped inside. It was dark, with only a small sliver of light coming from a crack in the roof. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel something watching me. And then, as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw it. There was a figure in the corner, huddled in the shadows. It was crouched down, with glowing eyes and bared teeth. I couldn't make out what it was, but I knew it wasn't human. I tried to back away, but I was frozen in fear. The growling grew louder, and then the figure lunged at me. I screamed as it tackled me to the ground, clawing at my face and biting my neck. I could feel its hot breath on my skin, and I knew that I was going to die. But then, suddenly it was gone. The growling stopped, and the figure disappeared into the shadows. I stumbled to my feet and ran out of the attic, slamming the door behind me. My heart was racing as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. What was that thing? And why was it in my attic? For weeks, I tried to ignore the strange noises coming from the attic. But every night, the growling would start up again, and I knew that it was still up there, waiting for me. I tried to tell myself that I was just being paranoid, that there was a logical explanation for the noises. But then, one night, I woke up to the sound of scratching on my bedroom door. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but then the scratching grew louder, more insistent. And that's when I heard the growling again. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself that it was just a stray animal outside. But I knew deep down that it wasn't. It was that thing from the attic, and it was trying to get to me. I started to see it in my dreams, too. It would appear as a shadowy figure, always watching me from the corner of my eye. I couldn't escape it, no matter where I went. And then, one night, it finally showed itself again. I was walking down the hallway when I saw it, standing at the end of the corridor. Its eyes were glowing red, and its teeth were bared in a snarl. I tried to run, but it was too fast. It tackled me to the ground, pinning me down with its claws. I could feel its hot breath on my face as it growled in my ear. I thought I was going to die, but then, suddenly, it was gone again. I stumbled to my feet, gasping for breath, and ran out of the house. I never went back. I sold the house and tried to forget about the creature that had haunted me for so long. But it was impossible. Everywhere I went, I felt like it was watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. I started to research the creature, looking for any clue as to what it could be. I found stories of other people who had encountered similar creatures, and they all had one thing in common. They had never been able to get rid of them. I realized then that I was never going to be able to escape it. It was a part of me now, a shadow that followed me everywhere I went. I started to lose my mind. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything else. I was consumed by the fear of what was lurking in the shadows. And then, one night, it came for me again. I was walking home from work, trying to keep my head down and avoid any dark alleys, when I heard the growling again. I turned around, and there it was. The creature was standing in the middle of the street, its eyes fixed on me. I tried to run, but it was too fast. It tackled me to the ground, pinning me down with its claws. And then, something strange happened. As I looked into its eyes, I saw a glimmer of recognition. It was almost as if it was trying to communicate with me. I don't know how, but I understood what it was saying. It wanted me to come with it, to leave everything behind and join it in the darkness. I was tempted, for a moment. The fear had become too much for me, and the thought of being able to escape it was tempting. But then, something snapped inside me. I realized that I couldn't give up, couldn't let this creature win. I fought back with everything I had, and finally, it released me. I stumbled to my feet, gasping for breath, and ran. I ran as fast as I could, not stopping until I was miles away from the creature. I don't know what happened to it after that. Maybe it found someone else to haunt, or maybe it disappeared into the darkness. All I know is that I'll never forget the fear that it instilled in me, the terror of knowing that something was out there, waiting for me in the shadows. And I'll never stop fighting, no matter what comes my way. Fifth story. Black-Eyed Children. I discovered the existence of the Black-Eyed Children through the podcast Paranormal Mysteries. Being unemployed for a few months, I have been rapidly moving through creepy podcasts like Spooked, Radio Rental, and The Grave Talks. None of them had mentioned Black-Eyed Children. It was supremely interesting and equally as terrifying. If you have never heard of the BEC, let me give you a rundown. First, just like most creepies, they creep at night. Night helps hide their solid black eyes. This is a dead giveaway of what they are. They are mostly normal, except they seem to be wearing clothes from the last century. Second, they tend to show up at your house, asking to be let in to use the phone. They say they are lost, or make up some excuse for not having a cell phone. They won't say much else. They keep to the same dialogue. It is important to them to gain access to your house. Third, other than the black eyes, no iris, no scara. Another giveaway is the accompanying sense of dread. Powerful dread. Pets will lose their shit and not act right, even before you know these kids are there. For some god-awful reason, people have let them inside their homes. People have reported that the children do use the phone, but then sit down and don't say a damn word unless spoken to. Our parents will be here soon, is just about their only reply. Abruptly, they stand up to announce the arrival of their parents, who never come to the door, by the way, and they leave. This is where shit hits the fan. Pets go missing or are found dead. People involved in the encounter develop some unexplainable illness or other. Every pet, every person, every time. Perhaps the scariest part is they have been known to approach people in their cars. In this case, they ask for a ride to your home. Rarely, but it does happen, they will be found at your place of work. This podcast had a special effect on me. I have never been so scared and paranoid after listening to a paranormal story. Maybe it's because I live alone? Perhaps it's the fact that these are children, and our first instinct is usually to help children? I don't know, but it freaked me the fuck out. I felt foolish, but for weeks I expected them to knock. Then they did. I was closing my blinds well before dark, out of sight, out of mind, right? For weeks, and tonight was no different. I was unwinding in the living room, the classic stereotype of a couch potato, complete with snacks. For no reason I could see, both dogs started whimpering, whining. Puppies, what's wrong? I had no clue what was going on, but their agony was apparent as their whining increased in pitch and frequency. It didn't take long before both German shepherds got up and slunk away. Hey, come here. What's going on? Strange behavior. Looking back, this should have been my first clue. Before I could get up to go after them, I felt a sudden and incredible sense of foreboding. It was like an instinct was telling me something was wrong. But how could I honor this feeling when clearly nothing was wrong? Where was the real evidence? Dread replaced foreboding. It all clicked when they knocked. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know what was at the door. Even inside my own house, where all I had to do was stay put, I felt absolutely helpless. If I was the one with the power, why was I so petrified? My brother and I are lost. May we use your phone? The voice of a child, a girl. Fuck. If I had any doubts, they were obliterated with that voice. I needed the comfort of my dogs. I slid off my couch. Crawling to my dogs, I did my best to avoid something that I was so sure was watching me. Just as I passed the front door, they knocked again. Please, we can't come in unless you let us. I wish I could describe the dread, the fear. It made me think of how people describe being stalked by an apex predator. They can't see it but know it's there. The helplessness was real. The second I reached my dogs, the knock robbed me of the monochrome of relief I had gained. Please, they will be worried. The scariest part wasn't crawling past the door, where I imagined them barging in. No, it was the thought I had at that moment. The thought that, maybe if I let them in, this would all go away. They were just helpless kids. Me and my dogs kept each other company until the children left. We didn't sleep that night. I thought about the encounter all the next day. Would they come again? What could I possibly do if they did? I was afraid they hadn't got what they wanted and would return. I scoured the internet, searched the library, and listened to any relevant podcast or YouTube video. I didn't find any precautions I could take, but as long as I didn't answer the door, I would be fine. Just don't let them in. Simple. I shuddered when I remembered I had the brief thought of letting them in. The only comfort I could find was in what I couldn't find. Nothing, absolutely nothing mentioned them returning. I felt myself settling into this notion. They had one shot and missed. Nightfall found me and my dogs in the computer room. It took a few hours, but I was finally getting comfortable. I was letting my anxiety out in a video game. Last night was history. Suddenly, I felt as if someone threw a weighted blanket on me. A weighted blanket of dread. Oh no. I looked around for the dogs. They were nowhere I could see. How could I have missed their exit? I knew what was coming next. What if I just let them in? Please, may we come inside? We are lost and scared. They knew exactly where I was and hadn't even bothered with the front door. Silence from my end and theirs. Then they knocked. This will pass. This will pass, I repeated to myself. But I knew in my soul they weren't going to stop. Braving a stupendous amount of trepidation, I got up to let the kids in. 6th story. My BK experience. I work at Giant Eagle in Seven Fields, Pennsylvania, which is a grocery store for those who do not know. I work as a cashier/cart pusher, so needless to say I see tons of people every day. I've been working there for several months, and nothing had hit me as hard as the experience with a BK, or black-eyed kid. I was pushing carts this morning from 8 a.m. till 12 p.m., and around 8:30 was the time I saw him. He was just standing near one of the entrances to the store, showing no interest in entering it for one reason or another. I kind of ignored him for an hour, not realizing he hadn't moved the entire time. Pushing carts makes time go by really fast, and I was blaring my iPod, so some guy standing there was not really a big deal to me. It was when he decided to introduce himself to me was when stuff got weird. The cart holders, or whatever they are called, were empty, so I waited by the doorway for more people to leave when I noticed that he had moved to my right without me noticing. He tapped my shoulder, which led to my line of vision, meeting with his black eyes. Those black eyes. They seemed to have led to the core of the abyss, and a sudden chill shot through my spine as his glance met mine. I couldn't control anything then. My mind went blank, and the feeling of death's scythe was being scrapped on my face. So, how long do you work today? The man asked in a monotonous tone that made me feel worse. Oh, I don't know. I think a few more hours, I said, hesitant, fearing for my life. Well, that is good. Working can take a lot out of a boy like you. A sly bit of a chuckle followed his words out, but I ignored him. Seeing an old lady struggle to get her bags out of her cart was my savior in escaping this awkward moment. I hurriedly went to help the elderly woman and escorted her cart to the drop-off before going to the other entrance to avoid the man, who was still standing, looking at me as if seeing through my soul. From the other entrance, you could see through to the entrance the man was standing at as it leads to the actual store. Instead of walking through the entrance to my side, he started walking around the entrance and on the road to my entrance and proceeded to stand next to me. What are your plans for tonight? He asked, sending a plethora of chills deep into my heart. That's none of your concern, sir. You seem tense. Your job doesn't seem that hard, is it? Why are you here? Why don't you go buy some groceries or something? He took a while before answering, maybe a minute or two. I have nowhere to be, so I wanted to people watch. This was the trigger that ignited my escape, which led to entering the store, to which the man just stayed in place. I went and grabbed him, one of my mangers, and told him about the man. Concerned, he escorted me out and I showed him where the man had been, but he was no longer standing around. Tim wasn't the type of person to get mad over being lied to, or so he thought it was a lie, and he simply left me back to my job. I am terrified to return back to my job, or even my general safety. I feel like I am being watched this past half hour since I got home, but even though I knew no one was around, I had to lock the doors and windows and turn the TV up to block out the negative thoughts that continue to plague me. Does anyone have any advice on what I do next? I have little knowledge of the BK, but any help would be appreciated. 7th story. I met a mermaid when I was 9. I met a mermaid when I was 9 years old. Well, met is the wrong word to use. I saw a mermaid when I was 9. We never spoke, but she was my friend. Sometimes she would wave to me when I was out on the water. Other times she would just stick her head out of the water and smile. I didn't have many friends at 9, your usual situation. A quiet girl with a mousy appearance that would rather read a book than have makeover sleepovers. However, my quality of life didn't suffer because of this. If anything, in my mind at the time, my life was far better than those of my peers. I got to live the lives of the characters I loved most whenever I opened a book. So why would I care about a stupid sleepover when I could step into a mysterious castle in England with a mere flip of a page? Admittedly, I did get a little too caught up from time to time with my ranting and raving about magical worlds and creatures that slipped from the pages to my reality. So it was no surprise to me when my mother rolled her eyes after I told her that I had seen a mermaid. She rolled her eyes and shook her head, sending a quick shot of cold through me, a feeling that came with knowing she was rejecting my idea, leaving me embarrassed and with a need to prove what I was saying was true. Come on, Mom, please. I saw it, I know I did. That's what you said about the dragon you saw fly over our house on Tuesday. She was right. I had made that up. I thought I had seen a dragon, but quickly realized it was a cloud. But that didn't stop me from immediately telling my mom all about it. Today was different, though. Today we were at Grandma's house by the beach. There was something about that place that enhanced my imagination, maybe because we were right on the water, and the air always smelled of things I had never smelt before. Earlier that day, I had gone out on our boat with my grandma for a few hours. We were about 30 minutes west of the dock when I saw her. She was exactly how I pictured mermaids, blonde, smooth skin, smiling, bright blue eyes. She bobbed up and down in the water, grinning at me, her arm raising up in a quick wave. I remember my heart stopping and having to make an effort to hold in yelps of glee so I didn't scare my grandmother. By the time I could tell my mom, I was ready to burst. So it was extra disappointing when she shot me down like she did. I didn't bother pushing it with my mom anymore that night, so I decided to turn around and go to bed, knowing I would just have to show her the mermaid in the morning. Sure enough, the next day, she was there. I looked over the front of the boat and squealed when I saw her peering out at us from behind the same rocks she had been near the day before. I darted to the back and grabbed my mom, yelling nonsense about how she was wrong and I was going to be right for once. In the 5 seconds it took for me to get her to the front of the boat, the mermaid had disappeared. My face fell. I looked up at my mother, the beginnings of disbelief on my tongue. But before I could say anything, she just smiled and shook her head and walked back to the far end of the boat. I didn't understand. She had been there a second ago. So where was she now? I was determined to see her again. I sought her out for 4 more days, until finally I was ready to give up. It was my last day at the beach, and I was ready to decide that I had made her up in my head. When my grandma offered up one last boat ride before I went home, I agreed, not thinking I would see the mermaid, but just to be on the water one last time. So you can imagine my surprise when I saw her, just as I had seen her the other 2 times, floating idly by the rocks. She looked a little different this time. Her hair looked whiter than before, and her eyes had become completely blue from end to end. Her smile seemed weighed down. The skin around it looked gray, but it could have just been a trick of the light on the water. She raised her arm a bit in a half-hearted wave. I did the same, smiling knowing I had been right all along. Over time I forgot about my mermaid friend, until last night. I had spent all day moving into my new apartment, and I crashed pretty early and woke up pretty late. When I woke up, I remembered a dream I had had about a blonde mermaid. She was screaming about how she was stuck under a rock, and she sobbed and sobbed into the water that she was scared and tired, waving one arm out of the water hoping anyone would see her. She looked familiar, so it didn't take long for me to remember the mermaid I had seen when I was young. I'm writing this now because I got lunch with my grandma today. She told me that earlier that week they had found bones in the lagoon outside her house, partially under the big rocks out west. I don't think I ever met a mermaid. 8th story. True encounter with a mermaid. Everything you think about mermaids are wrong. They are not busty women with long flowing hair and thin waists. Well, they kind of are, but they are not nice. Trust me. My family owns a small lake house near a body of water, green with algae in South Florida. I can't say much about the location, though all I can give is it's in Florida. I live upstate in New York and decided to visit the lake house during midsummer. Alone. The first few days were fun and sunshine, the notorious weather. Florida is known for then the real Florida weather kicked in. The storm was horrible, thunder, and all the works, but in the distance I heard it. A soft melody, high-pitched, just right. It was enchanting. The voice seemed to multiply and grew louder. As the storm progressed, it almost sounded like a continuous battle cry. I couldn't help but feel pulled to the voices, half by curiosity and the other by the seeming hypnosis the song caused. I opened the wood door to the outside. Reluctantly, may I add, as I opened the door it felt like my body was not my own. I felt like a puppet on a string, and the voices my puppeteer. The rain pounded hard against the porch roof, bound by logs of wood and twine. My bare feet met the wet, cold sand, and the rain pounds against my body, and I followed the voice. It leads to a moon pool that resided only a few feet from the lake, the water rising up from the water and overflowing, and I saw where the voices came from. Beautiful women sat in the moon pool, 3 women with long white hair and dark skin, bare-chested, with scales of gray, green, and red on their shoulders and cheeks, and piercing red eyes. They beckoned me to them, singing their soft, haunting song, and I stepped into the moon pool and sat in front of them, my clothes becoming wet. They swarmed me, touching my chest and hair, smiling softly. Then I noticed it. Below their waist laid fish like tails covered in scales, again gray, red, and green. They had long nails as well. When a certain mermaid brushed against my chest, my shirt ripped open from the sharpness. Then something bad happened. They smiled at me with sharp blood-stained teeth similar to a piranha's teeth. Some of them even overlapped, greeting extra layers of razor-sharp teeth. I snapped out of my trance and screamed loudly. One of them pounced, scratching my face deeply with her claw-like nails. The other one sunk her sharp fangs in my shoulder, and the other grabbed my arm tightly. I hit them with all the force in my arms. They growled and bared their teeth as I jumped out of the moon pool, almost slipping and falling against the wet sand. I rushed to the house and slammed my door, locking it tightly. I leaned against the door and cried, gripping my bleeding shoulder. I woke up the next morning thinking it was all a dream until I looked at the gashes and scar. Mermaids are not what you think. They are dangerous, and if you see one, run. Run as humanly fast as possible away from the ocean and lakes, and don't follow songs during a storm. Ninth story. Mermaids are real, but they are not what you think. I awakened to the laughs of my friends after they tricked my cream-covered hand to land on my face. I guess I was chosen to be the joke of the day. That morning we headed for the beaches, praying to God that nothing would interrupt our trip, and to my surprise, nothing did happen. For the next 2 hours of our lives, Johnny got to ride the waves for as long as he wanted while Jerome and I finally got to catch some fish. Everything was fine for once. Hell, we even took our chances to Cayucas and it was still fun. So fun I forgot all of my worries. That was until we all agreed to travel to Montana de Oso State Park just around the 4 p.m. From there we packed all of our stuff and headed for the park by passing down south of Baywood Los Osos, through the Pecho Valley Road, where we bared witness to the gorgeous natural sceneries of the jagged coastlines, accompanied by herds of blooming eucalyptus trees and narrow dune trails and roads surrounded by its native bushes, and with the sun still brightening the blooming bushes and warm sandy beaches. To be honest, I became a little frightened of the sea itself, as it does intrigue me for what might lie underneath. However, I thought I had nothing to fear, for I accompanied the friends who knew what to do in times of crisis. We knew how to look for each other. Finally, we stopped at this small parking lot lying next to the inland shore of Spooner's Cove and hopped on out. This time, all three of us were going fishing. We traversed further on Bluff Trail, steering away from the sheer bluffs that showed clear signs of erosion and weathering. This land was slowly descending into King Neptune's lair as the years went by. I hope I'm not alive to see that happen. Before we descended down onto the secondary beach that lies next to an eroded wall, we stood before the edges, taking in the view of the ocean. Then Johnny digs into his backpack and takes out a can of Coke and a small bottle of Jack Daniels, mixing the two together before each of us took turns offering a toast to the seas and consuming the alcohol. To King Neptune, we all proposed, just for the fun of it. "Where did you get Jack Daniels, dude?" I asked Johnny. "Oh, I borrowed it from my pops. He doesn't even know that it's gone yet." "Man, you're a crafty son of a bitch. You know that?" "Yeah, I know," he finished with a gleeful smirk on his face. From there on, the boys and I made our way down the dome-shaped beach and began fishing while I sketched the beautiful scenery. Time began to show its effect on the beaches, for the waves were beginning to swallow the jagged bottom rocks underneath the weathered cliffs, with the environment becoming increasingly chilly, so we left. But upon walking our way back to our vehicle, Jerome spotted something rather unusual. Back on the main beach, a large humanoid figure was walking its way into the one shallow cave underneath the far-end cliffs. "Well, what is that?" he asked, still perplexed by what he is seeing. "What?" I ask, then I see it. "What the? Seriously, what is that?" Jerome asked for the last time. "Johnny, come look at this." "What? Do you see that thing?" Johnny's eyes narrow at the far end of the beach. "I don't see anything." "Where are the binoculars?" I ask, wanting to take a closer look. "They're in the car, but what was it?" "I don't know, but it looked like it went inside that little cave opening." I pointed towards the spot. "Could just be an animal." "No, man. This thing was big and it looked kinda like a person." "Huh, let's go check it out then," replied Johnny with curiosity. "What?" "Nah, I think I'm gonna wait in the car," said an anxious Jerome. "Oh, come on. Don't pussy out now, Jerome," demanded Johnny. "I don't know, man. Something's telling me that we should just get." "Okay, fine then. Ben, let's go check it out." And he started moving down to the beach. I was forced to follow along with him onto the beach, carrying flashlights and eventually reaching the other end of the beach, where a large mound of jagged earth and the small cave opening is partly submerged in the freezing salt water. Now inside of the tiny cave, there lay ahead a darkened pathway with footprints beyond recognition of man. The prints appeared to resemble that of a bird's but bigger and appeared to be bipedal. However, Johnny ignored these details and followed the prints down into the darkness. Our lights guided us through the chilly blackness of the cave, which soon the footprints disappeared and the stone now morphed into large, steep stairs descending deeper into the earth. Everything about this felt wrong, as if we were never meant to tread this far. The cave even presented this ancient vibe, like no human had ever touched this part of the world. Finally, the pathway came to an end when we spotted some blue lights glistening at the end of the tunnel. This encouraged us to reach the end, but to our shocking discovery, we were gazing upon a gargantuan-sized base, with neon lights of numerous blue shades gleaming above our heads, illuminating the lair in this uncanny blue that was unlike any blue I had ever seen before. Tooth-like pillars stuck out of the submerged water lair, and wide stone bridges connected and branching out into several different tunnels, some even descending into the water. Black metallic webs and wires with ink-like substance oozing out encased the entire base, revealing its blurred reflections of the environment from the lights. My God, the blues. It was almost manipulating to watch. Holy shit, faintly whispered Johnny. What the fuck is this? I managed to utter. Johnny was lost for words, as was I. We had no clue of what to do next till we heard some indistinct struggle echoing through the base. It almost sounded like a woman. Through this vast lair, it was hard to pinpoint where the struggle was directly taking place, so we head to our left in quick pace, but enough for a stealthy approach. The first two doorways we encountered held nothing but dark paths leading to wherever it may lead. Upon the third doorway, what I saw would haunt me for the rest of my life. A lengthy anthropoid creature, maybe standing up to 9 or 10 feet, had its entire webbed hand covering the girl's face, suffocating her, then placing her unconscious body in this oval pod with an empty tank sticking out on its side. From there it interacted with these cryptids displayed on the pod and walked away. Quickly we moved out of its sight and hid ourselves behind some stone walls, and finally got a clear view of this creature. Its curved body outline resembled to a female's, with muscle formations differing from a human's and coated in a mix of light blue-green colors, aquamarine and cyan perhaps. Large oval-shaped eyes as black as the nightly sky, gills located on both sides of its neck, and a pale mouth hanging agape, showing its needle-like teeth and emitting rhythms of croaks and clicks. It even bore a dark, diamond-shaped jewel right in the center of its forehead. We watched it dive into the bright water and went to investigate the room. I still can't get over this shit. There were rows of other human captives stuffed in the pods, and the tanks completed with their blood. They all looked pale and robbed of their body fat. Their recent capture was the same surf girl Johnny knew, but her blood being sucked out from these wires stuck in the veins of her neck and wrists. Just as we stood stunned by this sight, a croak was heard from behind us. Before we reacted, its pale mouth extended itself out, biting Johnny's entire left shoulder and dragging him towards the water. I tossed my flashlight at it and made a direct hit against its eyes. It squealed in pain before recovering as I picked up Johnny and attempted to dash our way out of the room, before another creature leaped out of the water, nearly grasping our jackets. I carried Johnny partly out of the tunnel as quick as I can, for he was bleeding out and they were coming closer. We found the exit and tread our way past the freezing water and out into the open beaches. I yell for Jerome to come get us, and the car comes at quick pace. He approaches us with wonder and fear seen in his eyes. What the fuck happened to Johnny? Go. Get us out of here, now. I yell, but his eyes meet the creatures sprinting towards the car on the beach. Jesus! Cried Jerome as he bolted the car out of the beach. The creature came so close to our vehicle it left its hand reached in the open passenger's window, but I struck it back with my homemade spear right in its mouth. I didn't hurt it, but it took my spear and tossed it onto the ground. There were 3 of them slender fishlings out in the open sand, watching us leave the coast. As the ambulance came to the rescue, Johnny had stopped breathing by the time they arrived. His last words were, "I'm sorry, man," before passing out forever. None of us were right after that night, and to make matters worse, our families, even Johnny's, lost their trust in us. Some of them blamed us for his death, while others ached with curiosity of what happened that night. But when I told them, I was met with disbelief and harsh punishments. Eventually we would heal, and when the opportunity came to go to college, I enlisted myself in every class that deals with the study of marine life and the ocean. Upon my recent studies of these beings, which I shall refer to as the blues, through mythologies, I figured out that pretty much every culture from around the world all have something to say about underdwellers from the sea. Japan, Africa, the Middle East, hell, even the natives of Alaska have told tales of fish people swimming and snatching their victims away. While I am frightful of the seas, I will not let Johnny's death go in vain. The world has to know what these things are and do something about it. And when that time comes, I will return to the same beaches with the right crew and gear to finish the job. For Johnny. 10th story. The Smiling Man. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the U.S. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky, and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still, until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments I felt relieved, until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time, staring at him, and then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated, tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone. Except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away, or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen as the smiling man crept toward me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me. Still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the fuck do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper. What the fool? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling, and then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dance-walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off of the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see.